You've spent your entire life translating yourself into a language other people can understand, and somewhere in that translation, you disappeared. Not dramatically, not all at once, just slowly, carefully, methodically editing yourself down until what remains is a carefully curated performance of who you think you're supposed to be. And the exhausting part, the part that keeps you up at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, is that you've gotten so good at it that sometimes even you can't remember what the original version sounded like. Where are you watching this from right now? What part of this is already making your chest feel tight? Drop a comment, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. And more importantly, you need to know you're not either. And if something in you is saying yes, if you're tired of performing, hit that like button, not for me, but as a signal to yourself that you're ready to stop translating. Subscribe if you want to remember who you were before you learned to disappear. You know that feeling when you're about to send a text message and you rewrite it 4 times before hitting send. That moment when you're choosing what to wear and you're not thinking about what you want to wear, but what will make the right impression. That conversation where you laugh at a joke that isn't funny because everyone else is laughing. That's not small. That's not insignificant. That's you abandoning yourself in real time, and you do it so automatically now that you don't even notice the knife going in. You've become fluent in the language of acceptable. You know exactly how much enthusiasm to show without seeming desperate. You know precisely how much vulnerability to reveal without seeming weak. You know the exact tone to use with your boss, your parents, your partner, your friends, each one requiring a different performance, each one demanding you show up as a slightly different version of yourself. And you're so skilled at code switching between these versions that you've convinced yourself this is just what it means to be an adult, to be professional, to be loved. But here's what's actually happening in your nervous system while you're performing. Every time you smile when you want to scream, every time you say, "I'm fine," when you're falling apart, every time you agree when you want to refuse, your body registers a threat. Not the threat of physical danger, but something your nervous system reads as equally dangerous, the threat of rejection. And so your body does what bodies do when they're threatened. It contracts, it braces, it prepares for impact, except the impact never comes because you successfully performed your way to safety. You got the approval, you avoided the rejection, and your nervous system learns this works. Do it again, do it always, do it until it becomes so automatic you forget you're doing it. The performance started so early, you can't even remember learning it. Maybe you were 4 years old and you expressed anger and watched your mother's face close like a door, and you learned that anger makes you unlovable. Maybe you were 7 and you cried and your father told you to toughen up, and you learned that sadness makes you weak. Maybe you were 12 and you expressed excitement about something and got mocked by your peers, and you learned that enthusiasm makes you a target. These moments, these tiny moments that adults would call insignificant, they became the architecture of your personality. They taught you which parts of yourself were acceptable and which parts needed to be hidden, edited, erased. You learned that love was conditional. Not because anyone sat you down and explained it that way, but because you felt it. You felt how the warmth came when you were good and withdrew when you were bad. You felt how approval arrived when you succeeded and vanished when you failed. You felt how belonging required you to be less of some things and more of others. And because you were a child and you needed love like you needed oxygen, you made a deal. An unconscious deal, but a deal nonetheless. You agreed to become what they needed you to be in exchange for the love you needed to survive. And it worked. That's the cruel part. It actually worked. You got the approval. You got the belonging. You got to stay in the tribe. But the cost was you, the real you, the you that existed before you learned to perform. That version got locked away somewhere deep inside, and you threw away the key because keeping it felt too dangerous. What if that version wasn't lovable? What if that version wasn't enough? Better to keep it hidden, better to keep performing, better to stay safe. Except you're not safe. You're exhausted. There's a difference, and your body knows it even if your mind keeps trying to convince you otherwise. Your body knows because it's keeping score. Every time you betray yourself, every time you override your gut feeling to maintain someone else's comfort, every time you silence your truth to keep the peace, your body registers it. The tension in your shoulders, the knot in your stomach, the tightness in your throat, the headaches that won't quit, the fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, the anxiety that has no clear source because the source is everywhere. The source is the constant vigilance required to maintain the performance, the endless monitoring of yourself to make sure you're being acceptable. You've built an entire life around avoiding disapproval, and in doing so, you've created a prison with invisible bars. You can't see them, but you feel them every time you're about to speak your truth and you stop yourself. Every time you're about to set a boundary and you back down. Every time you're about to choose yourself and you choose them instead. The bars are made of all the times you said yes when you meant no. All the times you laughed when you wanted to cry. All the times you stayed when you wanted to leave. All the times you performed when you wanted to just be. And the most insidious part is that you've gotten so good at it that people think they know you. They think they love you, but they don't know you. They know the performance. They love the edited version. And somewhere deep inside, you know this. And it makes their love feel hollow even when it's genuine, because you know they're loving someone who doesn't fully exist. You know you're receiving approval for a person you're pretending to be, and that approval, no matter how much of it you collect, will never fill the emptiness that comes from abandoning yourself. Your body has wisdom that your mind has learned to ignore. When you walk into a room and your stomach clenches, that's not anxiety disorder. That's information. Your organism is telling you something about this environment, these people, this situation. When you're with someone and you feel your energy drain, that's not you being antisocial. That's data. Your system is showing you that this connection costs more than it gives. When you're about to say yes to something and your whole body screams no, that's not fear of commitment. That's clarity. Your deepest self knows what's true for you, but you've spent so long overriding it in favor of what you think you should do, what others expect you to do, what would make you look good or avoid conflict or maintain approval. There's a part of you that has never stopped trying to break through. It's the part that makes you feel restless in a life that looks perfect on paper. It's the part that makes you feel lonely in rooms full of people who claim to love you. It's the part that makes you want to burn it all down and start over, not because anything is wrong exactly, but because nothing is quite right. That part isn't your enemy. That part isn't your dysfunction. That part is your health trying to emerge. It's the actualizing tendency, the pull toward wholeness that exists in every living thing, the force that makes seeds crack concrete to reach sunlight, that makes rivers carve through mountains to reach the sea, that makes you feel like you're dying inside even when you're doing everything right. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're breaking open. There's a difference. Let me tell you about Maya. She was 34, successful by every external measure, and completely hollow inside. She had a career that impressed people at dinner parties, a relationship that looked stable from the outside, friends who thought she had it all together, and she did have it together. That was the problem. She was so together that nothing could get in, not real intimacy, not genuine joy, not authentic connection. She had optimized herself for approval and achieved it. And the achievement felt like death. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. She was in a meeting, and her boss asked for her opinion on something, and she opened her mouth to give the answer she knew he wanted to hear. The politically safe response that would make her look competent and agreeable, and something in her just stopped. She physically could not produce the words. Her throat closed. Her chest tightened. Her body staged a rebellion, and for the first time in her adult life, she said what she actually thought instead of what she thought she should say. The room went quiet. Her boss looked surprised. A colleague shifted uncomfortably. And Maya felt terror flood her system because she had just violated the fundamental rule, don't risk disapproval. But underneath the terror was something else. Something she hadn't felt in so long she almost didn't recognize it. Relief. The relief of telling the truth. The relief of letting her insides match her outsides for just one moment. The relief of being congruent, even if it cost her everything. It didn't cost her everything. That's what she learned. Her boss actually respected the honesty. Her colleague later told her she'd been thinking the same thing. The world didn't end, but something did end. The illusion that she needed to perform to be safe. The belief that approval was worth the cost of herself, the lie that she could keep living this way without eventually disappearing completely. Maya started small. She started noticing when she was about to lie and telling the truth instead. Not brutal honesty, not using truth as a weapon, but simple congruence. When someone asked how she was, and she wasn't fine, she stopped saying fine. When her partner suggested plans she didn't want to do, she said no instead of agreeing and resenting him later. When her mother criticized her choices, she stopped defending herself and just let the criticism exist without needing to fix it or fix herself. Each time felt like jumping off a cliff. Each time she survived, each time she got a little bit of herself back. The relationships that could handle her authenticity got deeper, the ones that couldn't fell away. And that hurt. That hurt in ways she wasn't prepared for, because she had to grieve the loss of connections she thought were real but were actually built on her performance. She had to face the fact that some people only loved the version of her that made them comfortable, and when she stopped being that version, their love evaporated. But what replaced those connections was something she had never experienced before. Relationships where she could breathe, where she didn't have to monitor herself constantly, where she could be tired or angry or uncertain or messy and the love didn't withdraw. You might be thinking this sounds selfish. Part of you is probably already arguing that we can't all just say whatever we want and do whatever we feel like and ignore how it affects others. And you're right. But that's not what this is. This isn't about becoming inconsiderate or cruel or reckless. This is about stopping the violence you're doing to yourself in the name of being considerate. This is about recognizing that the constant self-betrayal you're performing isn't actually serving anyone. Not really. Because the person you're presenting isn't real. And relationships built on unreality are inherently unstable. When you live from a place of seeking approval, you're constantly scanning the environment for cues about how to be. You're reading faces, analyzing tones, interpreting silences, trying to figure out what response will land well. You're not present. You're not connected. You're performing a complex calculation in real time, and it's exhausting. And it prevents genuine intimacy because intimacy requires presence, and you're too busy performing to actually be there. And here's what happens in systems when one person stops performing. The system resists. Your family might accuse you of changing, and they'll say it like it's a bad thing. Your partner might feel confused or threatened because the dynamic you had was built on your compliance, and now you're not complying. Your friends might pull away because you're no longer playing the role they needed you to play. This is normal. This is expected. This doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means the system is trying to pull you back into the old pattern because your authenticity threatens the homeostasis everyone got comfortable with. You're going to disappoint people. Let me say that again, because it's important. You are going to disappoint people. When you stop performing, when you start choosing yourself, when you begin living from your center instead of from their expectations, some people are going to be disappointed. They're going to be confused. They're going to be upset. And you're going to feel guilty about it because you've been trained to believe that their comfort is your responsibility. But their comfort is not your responsibility. Your integrity is your responsibility. Your authenticity is your responsibility. Your wholeness is your responsibility. The guilt you feel when you disappoint someone is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're doing something different. You're violating an old agreement, a contract you signed before you knew you were signing it, a deal that said you would be what they needed in exchange for their approval. And now you're renegotiating. Now you're saying, I need to be what I am. And if that doesn't work for you, I understand. But I can't keep abandoning myself to maintain your comfort. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Let me tell you about James. He was 41, married for 15 years, father of 2, and completely lost. He had built his entire adult life around being the good husband, the good father, the good employee, the good son. He never raised his voice. He never caused problems. He never made waves. And he was dying inside. Not dramatically. Not in ways anyone could see. Just slowly suffocating under the weight of being good. His wife would ask him what he wanted for dinner. And he genuinely didn't know because he had spent so many years defaulting to what everyone else wanted that he had lost access to his own preferences. His kids would ask him to play, and he would play. But he wasn't really there because he was thinking about work or worrying about whether he was being a good enough father or running through the mental checklist of all the things he should be doing. His boss would pile more work on him, and he would take it because saying no felt impossible, felt like it would reveal him as inadequate or uncommitted or not a team player. The breaking point came when his doctor told him his blood pressure was dangerously high and asked about stress. James said he wasn't stressed. He genuinely believed this. He had convinced himself so thoroughly that his life was fine that he couldn't see what his body was screaming. His doctor looked at him and said something that cracked him open. "Your body is trying to tell you something. Maybe you should listen." James started listening. He started noticing the clench in his jaw when his wife made decisions for both of them without asking him. He started feeling the resentment that built when his boss assumed he would work late without checking if he had plans. He started recognizing the exhaustion that came from constantly monitoring himself to make sure he was being acceptable, and once he started noticing, he couldn't stop. The awareness was relentless. He saw the performance everywhere. He saw how he had constructed an entire personality around avoiding conflict and maintaining approval, and he saw how much it was costing him. The shift started with small truths. When his wife asked what he wanted for dinner, he took a breath and actually checked in with himself and said what he wanted, even when it was different from what she wanted. When his kids asked him to play and he was too tired, he said he needed to rest instead of forcing himself to perform enthusiasm. When his boss asked him to work late and he had plans, he said no, just no. Not no with the elaborate excuse or justification. Just, "I can't do that tonight." Each time felt like he was risking everything. Yet each time his nervous system flooded with anxiety because he was violating the fundamental program: keep everyone happy, avoid disapproval, maintain the performance. But each time he survived. And more than survived. Each time he told the truth, each time he honored his actual experience instead of performing what he thought he should feel, he felt more real, more present, more alive. His wife was confused at first. She had married a man who agreed with her about everything, and now he was expressing preferences, having opinions, setting boundaries. It created friction. They had to renegotiate their entire relationship because it had been built on his compliance, and now he wasn't complying. It was uncomfortable. It was difficult. But it was also real in a way their relationship had never been before. She started seeing him as a person instead of a supporting character in her life, and he started showing up as himself instead of as who he thought she needed him to be. His kids noticed the difference too. He was less available in terms of quantity of time, but more present in terms of quality of attention. When he played with them now, he was actually there, not running through mental checklists or worrying about whether he was being a good enough father. He was just playing, just being, and they felt it. Kids always feel it when you're real versus when you're performing. The work situation was harder. His boss didn't take well to the boundaries. There were consequences. James didn't get the promotion he had been working toward. He was labeled as not being a team player, and it hurt. It hurt because he had spent his entire career building toward approval, and now he was watching that approval evaporate because he was choosing himself. But underneath the hurt was something else, something solid. The knowledge that he was living with integrity, the certainty that he was being congruent, the relief of not betraying himself every single day. You're at a choice point right now. Reading this, part of you wants to keep performing because it's familiar, because it's kept you safe this long, because changing feels too risky. Another part of you is exhausted, is done, is ready to stop translating yourself into a language other people can understand and just speak your native tongue, even if no one understands it. Both parts are real. Both parts make sense, but only one part leads to life. The shift from seeking approval to living from your center isn't a single moment. It's not like you wake up one day and you're suddenly authentic and everything is easy. It's a practice. It's a series of small choices made over and over. It's noticing when you're about to perform and choosing to be real instead. It's feeling the fear of disapproval and doing the authentic thing anyway. It's surviving the disappointment of others and discovering you're still okay. It's letting relationships fall away that can't handle your authenticity and trusting that better ones will come. It's learning to trust your organism, your body wisdom, your gut knowing, even when it contradicts what you think you should do. In the beginning, it feels like you're constantly jumping off cliffs. Every authentic choice feels terrifying because you're violating the old program. You're risking the disapproval you've spent your life avoiding. Your nervous system will flood with anxiety. You'll feel like you're doing something wrong. You'll want to go back to performing because at least that felt safe. But if you keep choosing authenticity, keep honoring your actual experience, keep letting your insides match your outsides, something shifts. The fear doesn't disappear, but it becomes familiar. You learn that you can feel afraid and be authentic anyway. You learn that disapproval won't kill you. You learn that the people who matter will stay and the ones who don't won't. And both outcomes are okay. And gradually, over time, the authentic choices start to feel less like jumping off cliffs and more like coming home. You start to recognize the feeling of congruence, that alignment between who you are inside and what you express outside, and you start to crave it. The performance starts to feel uncomfortable in ways it never did before because now you know what the alternative feels like. Now you know what it's like to be present instead of performing, to be real instead of acceptable, to be whole instead of fragmented. Life doesn't become perfect. That's important to understand. Authenticity isn't a destination where everything is easy and everyone loves you and nothing hurts. You still have conflicts. You still face rejection. You still deal with difficulty, but the quality of your experience changes. The conflicts are real instead of avoided. The rejection comes from being yourself instead of from failing to perform well enough. The difficulty is the difficulty of being human instead of the exhaustion of pretending to be someone you're not. You start to notice things you never noticed before. The way your body relaxes when you're with certain people and contracts with others. The difference between connections that energize you and ones that deplete you. The clarity that comes when you stop overriding your gut feeling in favor of what you think you should do. The peace that comes from not having to monitor yourself constantly. The freedom that comes from not needing everyone to approve of you. Some relationships get deeper. The ones where you were already somewhat real, where there was already some foundation of genuine connection. Those relationships can handle your increased authenticity. They might go through an adjustment period where the other person has to get used to this more honest version of you, but if there's real love there, if there's real respect, the relationship will deepen. You'll discover new levels of intimacy that weren't possible when you were performing. You'll experience being loved for who you actually are instead of who you're pretending to be, and that love will feel different, solid, real, nourishing in ways that approval never was. Other relationships will fall away. The ones that were built entirely on your performance, where your role was to make them comfortable or validate them or be what they needed, those connections won't survive your authenticity. And this will hurt. This will hurt even when you know intellectually that these relationships weren't serving you. You'll grieve the loss. You'll question whether you're doing the right thing. You'll be tempted to go back to performing just to maintain the connection, but if you stay the course, if you keep choosing yourself, you'll eventually feel the relief underneath the grief. The relief of not having to maintain those performances anymore. The relief of being free from relationships that required you to abandon yourself, and new connections will come. People who are attracted to your authenticity instead of your performance. People who want to know the real you instead of the edited version. These relationships will feel different from the beginning, easier, more natural, less exhausting. You won't have to work so hard to maintain them because they're built on truth instead of performance. You'll discover what it's like to be loved for who you are instead of who you're pretending to be. And you'll realize this is what you were looking for all along. Not more approval, not better performance. Just this. Being seen and loved as you actually are. Your relationship with yourself will transform. This might be the most profound shift of all. When you stop abandoning yourself to maintain others' approval, when you start honoring your actual experience instead of performing what you think you should feel, you begin to develop a different relationship with yourself. You start to trust yourself. You start to like yourself, not because you're perfect or because you have it all together, but because you're real, because you're congruent, because you're whole instead of fragmented. You'll notice the voice in your head changes. The constant self-criticism, the endless monitoring, the harsh judgments about whether you're being good enough or acceptable enough, that voice starts to quiet. Not because you've become perfect, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer trying to force yourself to be something you're not. You're allowing yourself to be what you are, and in that allowing, there's peace. You'll start to trust your own judgment. For so long, you've been overriding your gut feeling in favor of external authority, what others think you should do, what would make you look good, what would avoid conflict. But as you practice honoring your actual experience, as you choose authenticity over approval again and again, you start to trust that you know what's right for you. You start to trust your organism, your body wisdom, your deep knowing. And this trust becomes a foundation you can build your life on instead of the shifting sand of others' approval. The exhaustion lifts. Not all at once, not completely, but gradually you'll notice you have more energy. The constant vigilance required to maintain the performance, the endless monitoring of yourself to make sure you're being acceptable, the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out what response will land well, all of that takes enormous energy. When you stop doing it, when you start being real instead of performing, that energy becomes available for actually living, for being present, for creating, for connecting, for joy. You'll discover that the things you were afraid would happen if you stopped performing mostly don't happen. You were afraid everyone would leave. Some people do, but not everyone. And the ones who stay matter more. You were afraid you'd be rejected. You are sometimes, but you survive it, and it hurts less than rejecting yourself. You were afraid you'd lose everything. You don't. You lose some things, but what you gain is yourself, and that trade is worth it. That trade is everything. You'll have moments of regression, times when you fall back into old patterns, when you perform instead of being real, when you seek approval instead of honoring yourself. This is normal. This is part of the process. You've been performing for so long that the neural pathways are deep, the habits are strong, the programming is automatic. When you notice yourself performing, you don't have to judge it or fix it or make it mean you're failing. You just notice. You just bring awareness. And in the next moment, you choose again. Authenticity isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. And being real includes the moments when you're not quite there yet. The invitation isn't to become someone new. The invitation is to stop being someone you're not, to let go of the performance you've been maintaining, to release the constant translation of yourself into a language other people can understand, to speak your native tongue even if it means some people won't understand you, to be congruent, to let your insides match your outsides, to honor your actual experience instead of performing what you think you should feel. This moment, right now, reading these words, you're at a threshold. On one side is the familiar performance, the exhausting but known pattern of seeking approval and abandoning yourself. On the other side is the unknown territory of authenticity, the scary but liberating practice of being real. You can't see what's on the other side. You can't know for sure what will happen if you choose yourself, but you know what happens if you don't. You know the cost of the performance because you're living it right now. What if you chose yourself? Not in some dramatic way, not by burning your life down or making reckless decisions, just in small ways. In the next conversation where you're about to perform, what if you were real instead? In the next situation where you're about to override your gut feeling, what if you honored it? In the next moment where you're about to say yes when you mean no, what if you told the truth? What if you started letting go of approval not all at once, but one choice at a time? You don't have to do this perfectly. You don't have to get it right. You just have to start. You just have to notice when you're performing and choose to be real instead. You just have to feel the fear of disapproval and do the authentic thing anyway. You just have to survive the disappointment of others and discover you're still okay. You just have to keep choosing yourself until choosing yourself becomes the new pattern, the new default, the new way of being. The pull you feel toward authenticity, toward congruence, toward wholeness, that's not dysfunction. That's not you being difficult or selfish or ungrateful. That's your health trying to emerge. That's the actualizing tendency, the force toward wholeness that exists in every living thing. That's life itself trying to live through you fully instead of through the edited, performed, translated version you've been presenting. And that force is stronger than your fear. That pull toward authenticity is more powerful than your conditioning. That movement toward wholeness is inevitable if you stop resisting it. What would it feel like to stop resisting? To stop fighting against your own becoming? To let yourself be pulled toward authenticity instead of constantly pulling yourself back toward performance? To trust that the part of you that wants to be real knows something your scared part doesn't. To believe that you're allowed to take up space as you actually are instead of as you think you should be. you're allowed. You're allowed to be tired when you're tired. You're allowed to be angry when you're angry. You're allowed to want what you want. You're allowed to need what you need. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to disappoint people. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to be complex and contradictory and messy and real. You're allowed to stop performing. You're allowed to let go of approval. You're allowed to choose yourself. The freedom you're seeking isn't on the other side of more approval. It's on the other side of letting go of the need for approval. It's on the other side of choosing yourself even when it costs you their comfort. It's on the other side of being real even when it risks rejection. It's on the other side of honoring your actual experience instead of performing what you think you should feel. That's where freedom lives. Not in being loved by everyone. In being true to yourself regardless of who loves you for it. So here's the question that will follow you after you finish reading this. What are you going to do with this moment? Are you going to let this be another thing you consume and then return to the performance? Or are you going to let this be the beginning of something different? The choice is yours. It's always been yours. You just forgot you had one, but you do. You have a choice right now, in this moment and in the next moment and in every moment after that. The choice to perform or to be real, to seek approval or to honor yourself, to keep translating or to speak your native tongue. What are you choosing?